Well, last year's defensive line struggled bad. Did the transfer portal bring enough muscle to fix it? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Mississippi State, your daily podcast on the Mississippi State Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Jaron, Spor, National College Football writer at Athlon Sports. That's Landon McBride. We've got another position preview show for you today. We're moving to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, we're going to talk about the defensive line, tons of transfer portal additions. We also got to talk about the linebacker room. They've returned some players. They also added in the transfer portal. Is that going to be an improved unit? And then the cornerback position. We got to talk about the pass coverage. Will it be an improved unit as well? Because we know how bad the defense was last year. They better be improved. But first, let's start with the defensive line. And again, we've talked about it many times. Our lads does a great job of kind of giving you an idea of who probably will start, but it's not a definite or an official one. For the defensive line, they have Red Hibbler, transfer. Funny enough, all three of these guys that I'm going to listen first are transfers. Red Hibbler, transfer. Jamil Burrows, transfer. Will Whitson, transfer. So all three of those guys are transfer portal additions. Red Hibbler comes from NC State. He played in 17 games, had 19 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. Jamil Burrows, he comes from Miami, but also was at Alabama, played sparingly at Alabama, 15 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss. And Will Whitson had the most production. He came from Coastal Carolina, played in 17 games, 63 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 5 sacks.
Yeah, I mean, bringing all those guys in, plus a couple guys farther down the depth chart from the transfer portal, they finally have depth here, which is huge along the D-line in any conference, especially in the SEC. And I really like Will Whitson. I think he could have a very big year. Big guy, 6'5", 295. That's very large for a defensive tackle. You don't normally see guys over 6'5" that are under 300 pounds. So that means he is big and fast, or at least quick for his size. And, he has 5 sacks in his career, 10 tackles for loss. Those are good numbers from an interior guy. And I expect him to kind of be kind of an anchor point for the middle of this defense, kind of like a 3 technique kind of player. And I really like him coming in this season.
Yeah, I like him a lot too. And these are guys that should plug up the holes too, because Jamil Burrows is a massive human being. I should say he's the one that should plug up the holes because he's massive. He's listed at 6'3", 326 pounds. Big guy. Will Whitson, again, you mentioned him. The production speaks for itself. And same with Red Hibbler. He had a really good career. Obviously had a injury-shortened season last year. But his one full season, 7 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 13 tackles. I mean, that's a pretty solid season for a guy. But the thing is, with how bad the room was, I mean, getting this kind of depth just means a ton. And we talked about it with the offensive line yesterday, where you have a lot of guys at the same level of player, but which makes it where you can rotate guys in and out. You just don't have that star yet.
Yeah, there's no star, but there could be. I mean, you mentioned right now the top 3 guys listed all transfers. The next 3 guys were all here last year. And then if you go down to the third, 2 guys are transfers. So there's a lot of unknowns in this room. A lot of these guys could step up and be what we're missing. I mean, in Red Hibbler, you mentioned him, great production in his 1 year. I mean, 6.5 sacks is awesome from a defensive end. He is 6'2", which is a little bit on the shorter side for D. You don't normally see too many guys at 6'2". So, maybe that becomes a factor with some of these massive offensive tackles, but that's where technique comes into play and coaching and scheme and all of that. So hopefully he continues to have that kind of production there. And, Deontay Anderson has had a pretty good spring. And then Rashine, sorry, not sure how to pronounce that one yet. Thomas another transfer. So, I mean, there's depth at the defensive end position too. It's just they're in a lot better place. We don't know who the stars are. We don't know what the rotation is going to look like exactly, but there's a lot of bodies to throw out there now.
Yeah, and that's what you need. But the biggest thing is you got to fix the pass rush. The pass rush was so bad last year, and that will go a long way in determining how much improved this defense is, because people just don't realize how important the pass rush is, especially when it comes to coverage. We talk about sometimes there's coverage sack. You hear that term a lot.
Yeah.
That's just not something that you can rely on. You cannot rely on coverage sacks because the coverage is so great. You get this sack, maybe for a play or two here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But Mississippi State, we ranked 132nd in sacks last year. We had 10 sacks all season long. Like, that's not going to cut it. And even 20 sacks would be a big improvement because you'd be pulling it, but that still wouldn't be good. Like, you need to get into the 25 to 30 range is kind of where you need to be at next year. And they've got to figure out who's going to be a consistent pass rusher for them, because the history is that the guys that they brought in don't have eye-popping numbers either.
Right. Yeah, they really don't. So you hope that some of this is, the sum is greater than its parts. All of these guys just kind of lift each other up. They all kind of find their roles, and it becomes – you don't always have to have that one dominant guy who takes over the line, like Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa. You don't have to have someone like that. Sometimes you just have 4 guys who are very good at what they do.
Right.
And everyone has 6 sacks, and it all works out. So that's what you have to hope you built here, is a very good quality depth line where there's no weak links. There's no guys that can be kind of just washed out of the play, and everyone plays hard.
Yeah, for sure. And so we'll see if any step up, but that's what you're going to have. Otherwise, it's going to be another rough season defensively, or hopefully not as rough as what it just was if you don't have the guy steps up. But it all starts up front, and we know that. And especially in the SEC, we talked about the offensive line on yesterday's podcast. Same thing goes for the defense. Everything starts and stops with the defense. You were ranked 125th in the country last year in defense. And that's with one of the best defensive players in the country, and Isaac Smith. So you obviously have him back this year, and that's a big boost, and we'll talk about him. I believe we'll talk about him a little bit in today's episode, but more so in the safety episode, which will be on Thursday, so tomorrow. But, yeah, I mean, you just have to – you have to make these big jumps, and credit the coaching staff for recognizing that we have to go portal hunting, because 104th in the country in yards allowed, passing yards allowed, is not good. And so they went out, and we're going to talk about the quarterbacks. They got some quarterbacks, but a big part of that, again, was only having 10 sacks all season long.
Right.
When you do that, you put your defensive backs at a bad position, and that's something that they're going to have to fix. And then obviously 129th in rush defense. That's why you get the big boys like Jabril Burrows out there to kind of plug some holes.
Yeah, you got to have the big boys. And it doesn't matter how good your secondary is. They can't cover for 6-7 seconds. You have to make the quarterback move or hit him quickly. If you give him all the time in the world, it doesn't matter what else you're doing. It's over. So controlling the line of scrimmage is key. I mean, you have to be able to stop the run. You got to get some pressure on the quarterback, and hopefully these guys they brought in, the production translates, because, not a ton of production, but there's enough to make you think this is good.
Yeah, for sure. So it's going to be a fun group to watch because of all the new additions. And again, the defense starts and stops up there. You don't want to be 125th in defense again. Defense line's got to be better. And if it's better and the other positions are about the same, you'll still take a pretty good leap. But obviously you want all the positions to be better, but it starts with that one. So hopefully we'll see some progress there. But all right, we're going to talk about the linebacker position next. That's the kind of the quarterback of the defense. What are our expectations of that? They obviously got a big transfer this offseason. How big of an impact will he make? And the returning guys, how big of a step will they take? We'll talk about that coming up next. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. I've said many times, my favorite part is getting to see where I'm going to sit whenever I purchase Gametime tickets. I also love that last minute prices go down. A lot of other sites, prices go up last minute. But it makes you kind of, if you don't want to pay it up front, you kind of wait and see. Now you might lose your ticket and your seat that you wanted, but prices go down and that makes things a lot better. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I do want to bring up, it looks like StreamYard's having some connection issues. Hopefully it's not showing up on the video here, but StreamYard kind of messes up sometimes. But we got to get into the linebacker play. Obviously, as I mentioned before we started, it's the basically the quarterback of the defense. So we got to get into some of the linebackers. Jalen Smith was the big transfer addition from Tennessee. He's expected to play your middle linebacker. Then obviously at your will linebacker, you have Zachary Tillman, and at your jack linebacker, you have Brandon Jennings. Interesting enough with the linebacker room, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the top 12, top 13. 9 of the top 13 are all new, either transfers or freshmen.
Yeah, there's a lot. Again, that's kind of a theme with a lot of these position groups is a lot of new faces in the room, and typically it's at a position that, you're pretty happy there's some new faces in the room based off of last year's performance. And yeah, Jalen Smith is the big one. Pretty good year as a freshman, redshirt freshman at Tennessee, 34 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss. That's not bad for, first time really playing in the SEC. So I kind of expect him to not take over the leader of the defense as a whole, because we know, Isaac Smith is out there. He's still your leader, but Jalen Smith kind of taking over that quarterback of the defense type role and kind of being the leader going forward.
Yeah. And he had a strong year, obviously 34 tackles, 2 tackles for loss in his redshirt freshman year. He was kind of in the backup role, but I think he was probably going to have a good chance of starting at Tennessee this upcoming season with some of the guys they've lost. Brandon Jennings also had a strong season. He had 56 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks last year for Mississippi State. Tillman obviously had 30 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks. I said we'll kind of talk about Isaac Smith because he's plays that safety linebacker hybrid, so it's kind of he doesn't fit into one. So we'll talk about it a little bit here.
Doesn't fit cleanly in either group.
Yeah, and but he obviously had a massive year, 127 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. So he's the guy that the leader of the group, I believe, is going to be Jalen Smith, because Smith isn't really in that group. He's in the safety and linebacker grouping because of his position. Smith is the leader of the defense, obviously, and we saw that with the SEC media days. But I'm really interested to see, because you got Jalen Smith, young, talented linebacker, showed a lot of promise last year. Does he take that next step? But then you got some veterans around him. Tillman's a junior. Jennings is a redshirt senior. Even the backups that have come in from the transfer portal, you got Malik, he's a senior. Darion he's a redshirt sophomore, but that's 3 years of work. And then Nick Mitchell also, obviously has been here, but he's a redshirt senior. And then after that, you got a grad transfer. So past the senior, has played multiple years. And then after that, obviously it goes down to more your freshmen and stuff like that on the depth chart. But a lot of experience, but also some young talent.
Yeah, there's a lot of experience, and experience coming from different places, which can always be good because they bring just a different experience. Hey, I this worked for me over here. Maybe try this, kind of like teaching players new ways to do things. And we mentioned how this team has to get more pass rush. The jack linebacker position, which that's your Brandon Jennings, Malik Silla, Nevaeh Sanders, those guys are also kind of pass rushers, so they can help add a little bit more in the sack department, which Jennings needs to take a step forward in that, only 1.5 sacks. Silla, interesting guy, he's a good athlete, solidly rated recruit, but, didn't really ever put it together.
Yeah.
I mean, in his time at A&M, 1 sack, 2 sacks over his 3 years there. So you hope that, he kind of takes a step forward. And then Nevaeh Sanders, the most sacks at all of them, 4.5 sacks at Northern Illinois last year. So they can help with the pass rushing, which then in turn helps everyone else. So they're kind of almost like your fourth, the outside linebacker in the 3-4. So that's going to be big if those guys can all take a step forward and help in the pass rush as well.
Yeah, help with the pass rush, like you mentioned, off the edge, but also in blitz packages. Obviously, defensive backs will play a factor in that too. If you bring a cornerback blitz or safety blitz or whatever, that's the one thing I want to see if they use Isaac Smith more in, and if he's able to get home a little more often. Obviously, he had the strong year with 127 tackles, but he only had 2 tackles for loss, and he didn't have a sack last year. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see if he can take that step and grow his game there while also growing his game in pass coverage as well. But yeah, I mean, Mississippi State, you didn't have a lot of tackles for loss, and yes, that's the defensive line, but that's also your linebackers. Now your linebackers were 4 of your top 5 in tackles for loss last year. But it was 3, 4, 4, 5. So 5 was your leader and 3 was your 5th guy. So you had a lot of guys with anywhere from 1 to 5. But you need to have more. You need to have some guys in the double digits. And, part of that is scheme, but part of that is just winning your one-on-ones. And in terms of scheme, some of it is just overall scheme, but some of it is catching teams off guard, and they're not expecting the blitz from this side or, disguising stuff, whatever the case may be. But, yeah, some of it you just got to – it's just the Jimmies and Joes. You got to win.
Yeah, you got to win, and you got to – you can bring in as many people as you want, but there still has to be development, even from them once they get here. Unless you're bringing in, the best linebacker, sure, you'd love development, but it doesn't have to happen. But in this situation, all the guys you brought in, they need to continue to grow. The guys who are still here, you hope they take a step forward, and that some of the issues last year was learning the new defensive scheme. You hope that is some of the issues. It is a new defensive scheme, and you had new players last year. So hopefully the new players this year just kind of supplement, plug some holes, and you just see a greater level of competence across, just the whole defense, because there were just so many holes. And I don't know if you can plug it with transfer alone. You have to get growth from within.
Yeah, you have to have growth from within, and when you rely on the transfer portal, you're relying on it all to mesh and mesh quickly, and that's tough. Yeah. You're basically relying on freshmen. Now, they have experience, obviously, but you're basically relying on freshmen to make an impact is essentially what it is. Obviously, these transfers aren't freshmen. They have experience, but I just mean they're new to the team, and they're having to figure everything out. But you can't be much worse than you were last year. So that's the one positive thing.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if that's super positive, but it's where we are.
Accurate. It's just accurate. All right, we got to talk about the quarterback room next, because last year was not pretty either. Nothing on the defense was pretty, but the quarterback room obviously struggled as well, and a lot of that had to do with some of the other stuff we've talked about. But will we see improvement from them? We'll talk about that coming up next. All right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so let's talk about the quarterbacks. So the people that are projected to be the starter, Kelly Jones and Diago Brumfield, obviously guys that were here last year. Brumfield, transferred earlier in his career from Memphis. But after that, you got a transfer in Javen Williams that came in. You have Hunter Washington, who is a redshirt senior. Again, was here last year, but had transferred in the past. Sorry, not Hunter Washington. I meant Hunter Washington's going to play safety. Dwight Lewis III is actually, as I mentioned, he's a redshirt transfer senior, but he did transfer this offseason. So you got some transfers. You got some guys that have been here. But as I mentioned earlier, you were 100 and what did I say? 120 something, 104th, I believe, in passing yards allowed, and you allowed 11.9 yards per completion. Not great.
Yeah, you did that, and the guy who was your number one corner last year, who's the best person, is at Texas Tech now. So, Jones and Brumfield were both on the team, made starts, but they're not guys that give you a ton of confidence. This is what I'm talking about, the growth from within. They have to be better, or this defense, if they're getting burned, it doesn't matter how quick you're getting to the quarterback, unless you're getting there in under a second. So
and they allowed 23 passing touchdowns, so they got burned a lot too.
Yeah, so they have to improve dramatically. The thing is, with some of the guys, this is why we talked about they were always looking at bringing in another corner in the transfer portal because they needed a little bit more. And then you have one of the main backups that you can see out there is Dwight Lewis III, and he's coming from NAIA school. So he's coming massive jump up in competition. Now, had a good year down there, 25 tackles, forced one fumble, had 4 interceptions, blocked a PAT, had 2 pass breakups, had a pick 6. So, I mean, good year, put up good numbers. That's what you want from a corner, but it's at such a much lower level than what you're dealing with. I mean, at Marion, then you're going to play in the SEC that you have to wonder if that's transferable this quickly.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned he had 4 interceptions last year, again, at a lower level, but turnovers were a big issue last year. Mm-hmm. Mississippi State ranked 110th in total turnovers forced, and 12 is all they gained. Mm-hmm. 7 of those were interceptions, 5 of those were fumbles. That's not good. Again, I mean, every single stat you look at on defense was not good and was not good enough. And it's obvious, obviously, when you finish with a 2-10 record, that's going to be the case. But you were also 117th in scoring defense. You allowed 34 points a game last year. Like, you look up and down the deal, and it's terrible. And if it doesn't get corrected, not only are you going to have another rough season, Jeff Lebby's going to be out of a job here pretty soon. And not saying this year. We both think that he'll make it through this year regardless of the season they have. Yeah. But if he doesn't prove that he's not an offensive coach that's a head coach that can't do anything defensively, if he can't prove that, he's going to be out. I mean, we've seen several coaches in the past. Now, Lincoln Riley is probably the best example because he's been still a pretty good head coach, but his defense has always been terrible. Mike Leach had a history of his defenses being terrible. You have to prove, and that was kind of the worry of Josh Heupel earlier in his career, but obviously he had great defense this past year. But you have to prove that you can be a complete head coach and not just an offensive coordinator disguised as a head coach.
Yeah, if the defense doesn't improve, I think it's safe to say these defensive coordinators will be gone, and then you have to deal with bringing in a whole other system and finding players to fit that. So not sure that really gets you too far either. But, yeah, this corner position is outside of the nickel. It's a little rough. I mean, you feel good about the nickel, but everywhere else it's concerning because, I mean, Javen Williams, who is your predominant backup at another one of the other ones, is coming from Kennesaw State. He did have a pick 6 last year, but again, Kennesaw State isn't lining up against Georgia. And so, I mean, they may have actually, but
if they did it didn't end well. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen today. For your second listen, check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Jaron. Check out my work over at Athlon Sports. That's Landon. Follow us, Locked On Mississippi State. We're on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. We're going to try to post daily videos Monday through Friday. We usually do. Obviously, this week we've been traveling, not able to do it as much as we would like, but we also post a question every day. We've been also trying to answer all those questions as well. But yeah, I mean, hit that like, subscribe, ring the bell, get notified anytime we post. We definitely love the support. Can't wait for football season to get underway. But yeah, until next time, Hail State.
Hail State.